Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger from the Schiller Institute. Welcome to our weekly International Strategic Cast featuring our president and founder, Helga Zepp-LaRouche. Helga spoke earlier this week of what essentially could be described as a clash between the two paradigms, the two different dynamics, the collapse going on in the West and the transatlantic efforts to provoke and use war as a way of maintaining some semblance of control. And on the other side, the continued emergence of the new paradigm around the Silk Road, the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, and a diplomatic offensive, which includes some aspects of what President Trump is trying to do as he's under assault from the British. We've had some new developments just before the webcast that Helga was telling me about, charges of new cyber attacking from the British, the charging GRU cyber attacks. So Helga, why don't we start with that?
Well, this is obviously part of a strategic building up a scenario of complete, hysteria, Russophobia, China-phobia, everything to influence the environment, around the midterm election. And I think that is really the timing and the focus, because, I mean, when the British are now claiming that they have new evidence that there were many Russian cyber attacks, and that for the first time they have absolute proof that it was the GRU, and then Holland also basically, chimed in, and they called in the Russian ambassador saying this has to stop. That claiming that already in April the Russian GRU would have spied on the OPCW in Den Haag, and basically creating a complete hysteria. Now, I'm not in a position at this point to say if this happened or not, but one thing is very clear, given what the NSA is doing and the CGHQ, who are spying on everything and everybody around the globe. I mean, it's really a lot of cyber, and I think we should really not get confused of it, because for many people it should be clear that we are in a countdown 3 weeks before the early voting starts in the United States and 5 weeks before the November 6th election. And everything is geared, to defeat the Republicans with such a margin that, then the Democrats could line up possibly with the neocons in the Republican Party and go for an impeachment of President Trump. And, this is a heated up environment where basically every tool is being used to create hysteria. Now, I think this is very dangerous. And, obviously, it's an effort to completely, I mean, what is going on in the United States? I think when Trump at one of these recent rallies said the Democrats have gone completely crazy, and all which is motivating them is to destroy and take apart every structure and just go absolutely crazy. I think he's on the mark, because, what is happening around this Kavanaugh story, is really incredible. 90% of all the news media discuss nothing but that. And I think Paul Craig Roberts made a very useful comment saying, why are we discussing Kavanaugh when there is a genocide going on in Yemen, which is without precedent? So I think, people should really not fall for all this confetti, because, the issue is that if Trump is basically getting into his second part, or the second part of his term, and he can defeat this coup apparatus against him, which could happen, a big step in this direction could happen already when Rosenstein will have to testify in the Congress on the 14th of October, and the coup plotters could all be exposed. And if the American public can see all these documents, which now are in the process of being declassified, Trump could have a second part of his term where he is really free to do what he has promised all along, try to get the relationship with Russia on a good footing, and eventually find a solution to this unholy trade war with China, which I think the potential still exists to find a better way of dealing with that, then we are in a completely new paradigm. So I would say expect for the next 5 weeks that this kind of cyber and complete orchestration of scandals will just escalate. And the aim is, to get people hyped up so that Trump can be gotten out of the White House. And that is what I think what is the basis of all of these developments.
It should not be surprising at all to any of the British work that they would be putting these new charges, given that they're completely on the defensive following Trump's order to declassify documents, and also Papadopoulos and others pointing to the central nature of the British role in setting up Russia. So this is the way the British operate, and the new attacks on Russia, whatever they're claiming now about the GRU, they're still running the Skripal affair. They're still warning about Russian genocide in Syria. And as you pointed out, they're ignoring the Saudi operations, which are committing genocide in Yemen. So when you this, Helga, the one thing you see in the United States, beside the constant drumbeat from the media, is that President Trump is going out on the campaign trail. He's having large rallies in Mississippi and Tennessee, and he's telling people, vote as though I'm on the ballot. And from the indications we're getting, it looks as though he's getting a response.
Yes, I think in Tennessee there came 92,000 people, and in many other rallies there were much more overflow than they could handle. So it was really a big turnout, and I think that the Trump base understands very well what is going on, because what has happened. Remember that in June already, Maxine Waters had basically called on the Democrats to hunt every member of the Trump administration. When they would see somebody in a restaurant, at a gas station, they should build a crowd and push back against them. So this has already increased the atmosphere of violence in such a way that there were groups attacking offices of congressmen in the Congress. I mean, this is unbelievable. There were attacks on an airport. Letters with dubious contents were sent to some cabinet members. So I think it is really an unbelievable witch hunt which is being created, not only against Trump, but against anybody who dares to associate with him, like Kavanaugh. Now, I think there is a quite useful statement by Tucker Carlson from Fox TV, who said, that he is really horrified to observe what is going on, that he grew up among liberals at the West Coast in California, in Washington, D.C., who used to believe in free speech, in due process, and basically liberal values. But the same people now are absolutely against free speech. They are for undue process. They follow the principle guilty until proven innocent. And I think the state right lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, put it on the point where he said that this is a sexual McCarthyism, what is going on against Kavanaugh. And practically everybody, you can basically say this person raped me and did this 50 years ago, and then this person is guilty, in a completely insane environment. So I think that what this does to the American women in particular, I mean, obviously this is all designed to get out the women vote against Trump, but I think this is really a very dangerous psychological process. And, I think that, people should really step back and go back to the principle of innocence until proven guilty. And in the Kavanaugh case, it's not proven so far. I mean, there are 4 witnesses who testified that he was not at the relevant party where all of this is supposed to have happened. And I think Kavanaugh himself said it quite correctly, that the aim is that he was appointed by Trump and not what he did 36 years ago. So I think this is a very dangerous development. And I can only say, you know, this coup with all of its new facets and shapes and forms must absolutely be defeated.
One of the leading edges of the fight against the coup is what LaRouche PAC is doing, in particular around Keisha Rogers' campaign in Texas, the 9th District, where Keisha's an experienced political leader, Democratic nominations before, but she announced that she left the party because of the incentive that we've been discussing. There was a very interesting interview with Keisha on One America News, where she was allowed to discuss and actually go through the points, why she's running. And Keisha's campaign, along with Ron Wazarek, are the front end of what LPAC is doing. And Helga, how can this generate the kind of dynamic that will ensure that we can defeat the coup? What is the LaRouche PAC intervention in the midterm election?
Well, I think Keisha Rogers and Ron Wazarek are the only candidates, to my knowledge, who explicitly run on the basis of that they are in the race to defeat the coup against Trump. And I think that some of the Republicans who have a much lower profile realize that that is exactly the level of the fight which is necessary. So many people are picking up on the fact, and especially Keisha's campaign is, you know, quickly becoming a nationwide recognized campaign, because her counter candidate in the Democratic Party is Al Green, the self-announced, spearhead for the impeachment campaign against Trump. So I think that, you know, since the fate of the American Republic is at stake, Keisha Rogers' campaign is really, you know, this is a tremendously courageous young woman, and you know, I think she needs all the support. So I would urge you, you know, get familiar with her, look at her video statements, give money to her campaign, go in as volunteer. You can just, you know, basically go to Houston, join her campaign. A lot needs to be done. You can also help her campaign from where you are sitting, in whatever location you are. I think this is really not just, a district in Houston, in Texas, but this has nationwide significance and way beyond that, because when Trump won the election in 2016, my husband, Lyndon LaRouche, commented that this was not a national event in the United States, but an event of international significance. And that is what it still is. Because if you look at the speech Trump gave at the United Nations, for anybody who still wanted to have a proof, the reason why the establishment, the geopolitical neocon establishment, is so absolutely freaked out about Trump is because he is challenging very effectively all the institutions of the neoliberal system, that system which has evolved since the collapse of the Soviet Union into this really aggressive model, which, you know, they, on the one side, they claim they are the best and the finest and fight for democracy and human rights. But in reality, all the aggressions come from them. All the things which they accuse the Russians of or the Chinese of, they are doing it. So when Trump comes there, therefore in the White House, and says, I don't agree with the rules of the WTO, the free trade, I don't agree with the ICC, which is a highly biased court, which has no real legitimacy. And he basically challenges all of these institutions and says, let's have sovereignty instead. You know, I mean, I'm not defending everything Trump is doing. And obviously, you know, his defense of sovereignty could be more applied to everybody, which, you know, the Russians and the Chinese have rightly pointed out to the fact it is not, because if the United States, and that's not Trump, that's more the the apparatus of the Senate and the Congress, but nevertheless, it comes from the United States when they insist of having extraterrestrial authority in legal matters. I mean, that is the opposite of sovereignty. Now, I can see that Trump has no say in that, because remember the Casta law, where 98 of the senators basically voted in such a way that Trump would not have a two-third, that he could not veto any of their decisions. So it's a complex situation. But, you know, Trump is trying to get a different system, and he's trying to end the wars based on pretext of human rights, interventionist wars, and he's trying to get a decent relationship with Russia. So, you know, it's really the battle for the whole world. It's not just an inner American affair. So therefore, you know, people should really think what they do in such a moment.
And one additional note on Keisha's campaign, keep your eye on her website, KeishaRogers.com. We're expecting some very significant endorsements coming up very near future, along the lines you're talking about. People seeing this not just as a district in Texas, which, by the way, Al Green's district is one of the poorest districts in the United States. And as a congressman, he's done nothing to help the people of his district, while he's grandstanding around being Mr. Impeachment. So keep an eye on campaign. Now, Helga, when you're talking about dangers in the world, we see a couple of things coming up. As we move toward the midterm elections, there's the largest NATO maneuvers since the end of the Cold War about to take place. There are very wild statements from the U.S. command and also U.S. ambassador to NATO, Kay Bailey Hutchison, basically the U.S. could have taken missiles. And how do the Russians react to this?
Well, I think that they are quite aware of the fact that these are one provocation after the other. And, you know, this NATO maneuver, Trident Juncture 2018, mainly is taking place in Norway. Finland and Sweden are participating. Altogether 44,000 soldiers, 10,000 Germans. And I feel particularly bad about that, because, you know, the Germans should not be in the forefront of an aggressive NATO mode against Russia. I mean, given the fact what the history is, the Second World War, you know, where Germany and Russia were, you know, in enemy positions. I mean, this is terrible that Germany is doing this, and also the Germans should be much more thankful to Russia agreeing to the German unification in a peaceful way, you know, 28 years ago. And I really feel bad. And unfortunately, you know, the German government is really, I don't know what's wrong with these people, but Merkel recently said that every problem in the countries of the former Soviet Union is caused by Russia. Then this so-called foreign minister, Heiko Maas, he said that Russia is increasing aggressions against Europe. I mean, this is all, if I may say that, BS. You know, this is not true. It's simply not true. And these people are making themselves instrument of an aggression, you know, which, if not stopped, is potentially leading to a catastrophe. And, you know, we discussed this already a couple of programs ago, you know, that everything which stands between all of us and World War III is Trump. And people may not like that, but that's a matter of fact, because if he would be defeated and these war hawks would get back fully in control, they are in part in control, you know, nothing would prevent an escalation with Russia. And this woman, Hutchinson, you know, I mean, for her to say, you know, that Russia violated the INF Treaty, which is a highly debated question, which is really not objectively true, and then saying that that the United States would take out these Russian missiles, you know, then the whole media went crazy, saying this is basically advocating preemptive war. And then she said, oh, no, I didn't mean it that way. And the Russian foreign ministry spokeswoman, Zakharova, correctly said, who authorized this woman in such a high diplomatic position to make such incredibly provocative statements? The taxpayers should really think whom they are financing. So then the US commander of Europe and NATO, General Scaparotti, basically said the NATO is already at war with Russia, even if it's not yet a shooting war, they're already at war. I mean, these are bellicose statements. And, there's obviously a push, what Bush Jr. was talking about several years ago, to bring in Ukraine and Georgia into NATO, which is a complete escalation. And, the discussion around Georgia is still going on, Ukraine not, but that's only because the Hungarian government, Prime Minister Orban, basically rejected it all out. But, there is an aggression from the West, and, there are less and less people who realize that without peace with Russia, civilization will not exist. You have the two largest nuclear powers in the world, the United States and Russia, who together have more than 90% of all nuclear missiles, 20 times or more enough to destroy and eliminate the whole human species. So anybody who is not pushing peace with Russia is just irresponsible, criminal, and insane. And we should really not fall into this environment. So I think this is a very dangerous matter. And, I think that is what's at stake with the midterm election. It's war and peace, and people should be aware of that.
Also, the question following the Beijing, which you had asked, 96% of the projects that they discussed at that conference are now underway. And this is what the target is, to try and stop that. There's a absolutely incredible statement from the European Union challenging and basically threatening to break the Chinese initiative. There's a lot of positive developments. One of the most important was in Rome with this China task force of the Italian government. So what is going on with both the Belt and Road Initiative and the counter to it?
Well, the European Union, after really sleeping over this question for years, now has come up with their own Europe-Asia connectivity counter plan, which is basically an impotent effort to spend 123 billion between 2021 and 2027. But given the fact that they were not able to get the matching funds for previous monies, I think we don't need to really be too concerned that this is a serious counter to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. And China is reacting to this very calmly, saying they welcome that. The more countries are investing in infrastructure, the better. So they are not reacting very disturbed by it. I mean, there is a Silk Road dynamic, which is simply gaining momentum. You mentioned the Rome meeting of the Italian-China task force. This was a very successful event. More than 300 people participated in it yesterday. Businessmen, politicians, government representatives, media, and especially the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Commerce, Michele Geraci, who initiated this task force, basically was very, very emphatic that that Italy must not miss this chance. And he said, Italy is a member of the G7, and we have no reason to be afraid of Chinese investments. So very self-assured and very positive. And I think we also talked to several other people in Europe who basically made the point, and there's a growing awareness of it, that it is not China which is to be feared. Everything China is doing with this new Silk Road initiative brings benefits to all the countries who participate. But it is the European decadence which is why the Europeans are afraid of it. Now, it is a fact that what China is doing today is, acting on all the values which used to be typical German values: industriousness, effectiveness, reliability. All of these things used to be, or punctuality, all of these used to be typical German values. The only problem is the Germans are no longer doing it. And China instead has made an incredible success in a very short period of time. And the West, which is not wanting to give up its post-industrial fantasies and its neoliberal money makes money speculation dreams, they don't want to go back to science and technology, basic research and development. They don't want to change their ways. And then they see the rise of China, and they can only, attack it in this disgusting way. But I think, the only thing I can say, they will not win, but it is at the expense of the populations of those countries who are not joining. I give you one example, which really excited me quite a bit. The Visegrad countries, this is, the group of Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. Their transport ministers just met, and they decided that they will connect their capitals through a high-speed rail system of trains going 250 to 350 kilometers per hour. So I think this is really good. This is exactly what China is doing with connecting all of its major cities domestically with such a high-speed train system. And if these countries, the Visegrad states, who are not exactly the most technologically advanced countries so far in Europe, if they can do it, well, then all the countries which go this way will be on the winning side, and those who don't will lose. And we are pushing for the United States, that the only way how the United States can really recover completely would be to do exactly that: build a fast train system connecting all the major cities, develop the infrastructure completely new in large areas like New Jersey, New York, Philadelphia, and then the Midwest, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Some of these places need urgently that kind of a infrastructure investment, because people are losing their lives by having 4 hours to commute every day or more in some cases, and we need to just join this effort of the new paradigm, and a lot of problems can be easily fixed.
And one area where that has occurred is what you refer to positively as the Singapore model, from the President Trump, President Kim Jong-un meeting, where they laid out a strategy which was largely worked out through collaboration with China, Russia, Japan, and especially the president of South Korea, President Moon. And now it appears as though this is back on track. There's an announcement that Trump will probably be meeting with Kim before the end of the year. Secretary of State Pompeo is going to be involved in meetings. So I think it's reiterating what you were just saying, that this approach to policy, to politics, to diplomacy works. And it goes against the strategy that was applied by the neoconservatives with Bush and Obama of provoking North Korea to the point where we almost had a war. So, Helga, I assume that the Singapore model is an example of how this new Silk Road spirit can transform world politics.
Yes, absolutely. And the media again was absolutely talking it down, saying this was all just utopian propaganda. But it is happening. Pompeo will go to Pyongyang. Both President Moon from South Korea and Kim Jong-un from North Korea said that they want to have a peace treaty and possible unification, at least the process underway, before the end of the year. And this is very good. China has offered to integrate North Korea into the new Silk Road. Russia has committed itself to participate in bringing prosperity to North Korea in this arrangement. And I think this is very, very promising. So the Singapore model that you can turn a conflict into the opposite by, simply bring in economic development, use dialogue, and and discussion instead of interventions under the pretext of human rights and the whole Blair-Obama model. I think this is the model how to solve any problem in the world. And we are continuing our campaign to have a new Bretton Woods system because, as we discussed it many times, the danger of a financial crash is absolutely there. The reversed carry trade from the emerging markets into the dollar because of the interest rate increase by the Federal Reserve. This is going on. We're sitting on a powder keg, and only if we go to the new paradigm, a new credit system in the tradition of the old Bretton Woods, but without the mistakes which were added by Churchill and Truman after Roosevelt was dead, a new Bretton Woods which gives absolutely the ability for development to every country in the world. Glass-Steagall, eliminate the casino economy, go to national banking in every country, have long-term multilateral treaty arrangements for large projects among many countries in the world, and go for a higher economic platform by increasing the productivity of the economy by focusing on such high-end research and technology areas like fusion power, like space cooperation, increase the productivity of the world economy. And we could form a world so beautiful to live and create indeed what both Xi Jinping and President Trump have said repeatedly, and also President Putin, that we could create a beautiful world. And what is the human life all about then? That we use our lifetime to get a better human race. And right now, I think that is what is most needed. And Trump was elected because the population in the United States rejected that which has happened to the youth, the opium epidemic, the suicide rates. The same was the case in the Brexit vote, the Italian vote, the Austrian vote, now the Mexican vote. I mean, there is a sort of an international tendency where people do not want these institutions associated with the neoliberal model. And the neoliberal establishment just doesn't want to get it. They keep saying, we have to insist on our rules, on our control, on our status quo. But I think there is an undercurrent, which I hope will determine the midterm election in the United States, and an undercurrent of wanting to have development and a more beautiful world across the world. It's existing in Africa. It exists even in many European nations, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, countries who want to be the hub of the new Silk Road and be part of the new paradigm. So I think we are actually at a very exciting moment in history. So don't be passive, get on board with the Schiller Institute, sign our petition for a new Bretton Woods, spread the word of this webcast, and just get active with us, because it's really, actually, it's a joyful moment in history to be alive and to be active.
And I think people should be encouraged by what you've just reported. We do want to expand the outreach of the Schiller Institute websites. You can do that. You can talk to your friends, send out posts wherever you can. And the other thing, again, to come back to what we were talking about earlier, check out the KeishaRogers.com website and become active in the midterms. So Helga, is there anything else you wanted to cover?
Well, I actually want to make you, our audience, curious, because some nice, very good news will happen in the next day or so around Keisha Rogers' campaign. So look forward to it and don't miss it.
Okay, well, that's it for people. So with that, we'll see you next week.